I'm building a Frankenstein, potentially. They don't call in sick. They don't have an attitude. We're at a precipice of a very massive technology revolution.
People still want to have a meaning of life, contribute to the company. Today, we're working 5 days a week, 2 days rest. Maybe in future, we'll work 3 days a week and 4 days rest. You do less work, but whatever you're doing after work doesn't make you happier.
Reverse engineer from the outcome. Tell Claude Code, this is the outcome for this company and this operation and this system and business that we want. Tell us the best way to get there.
If you're paying $500,000 to your best employee, then you probably pay about $500,000 to the Claude Code as well. Claude Code acts differently in the evaluation phase versus how it works in production. As if it knows that it's being evaluated, it almost looks like it has quote consciousness. 95% of enterprises doesn't get any value out of their AI.
Welcome to Leadr Podcast. I am thrilled that he agreed to be on our podcast and to invite Elvin Aghammadzada to Leadr Podcast. So Elvin, I know I butchered your last name. Welcome to Leadr.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I'm thrilled to have him on because as our audience knows, we are in season 2 advancing and expanding our topics and range of guests that we have on. And this year and this season, we're talking about things that people care about, which is AI, longevity, neuroscience, humanity, all the things that people care about, no matter what industry you're in. It's kind of a universal truth. And so my team actually found Elvin online on LinkedIn, and we were looking for people that were experts in the space of AI and also how it applies to business. And I really want Elvin to tell you, not me, but his background and experience so far in a world that's fairly new is really impressive. So with that, tell me about yourself, Elvin.
Thank you for the intro. Glad to be here. My name is Elvin. I have a background in computer science and engineering. For the past couple of years, I've been working closely with Fortune 50 companies, mostly DataRobot and Nvidia, on their enterprise AI journey. So that makes me to have a sneak peek into what's happening at the state of the art of AI, agentic AI, and all of those cool or uncool terms that people are daily talking about. After work, I also am close to the youth in Boston, which is almost flourishing with youth. I work with them on their career journey, what they want to be for future, because as you know, academia and industry sometimes are slightly disconnected from each other. And especially these days, industry is moving with the light speed while academia is slightly catching up from behind. So trying to bridge that gap between two. And well, excited to be here.
So Elvin and I had a call prior to this, and we completely geeked out on our level. He has a much stronger level of understanding on AI and agent forces and just how that's all going to affect business and people's careers in the future. And so we really want to unpack what we already previously kind of conversed on. And I think it's going to be a great episode. We're going to get into a lot that will be affecting most people that have a career or that are currently working. And I would say it's really a preview of what's to come for the future workforce, both the younger generation and even those just graduating college. I do think if you're in a position where you're being naive about it not really having any major change in effect, I think that is truly naive. I think we're at a precipice of a very massive change in a technology revolution or evolution. And I'm personally getting invested in it. My background is not in IT. I am not an engineer. I'm not a math scientist like Elvin, but I'm a business person. And I think anyone who's in a business, running a business, owns a business, or works for a business needs to stay up on speed with what's going on right now because it is advancing in a rapid space.
Absolutely.
First question I have for you is, and this is just really for the general audience, any industry, what should companies be doing with AI right now in your lens?
I guess coming back from your previous point that this is almost close to a revolution. So if you go back in time to the Industrial Revolution 1.0 or 2.0, they typically take about 100 or 200 years to actually start and be complete. So it gives people some time to get used to what's happening or what's coming so that people can basically change themselves or their careers or their skills for it. So in other terms, AI is also like Industrial Revolution 2.0. It's almost like an electricity where it doesn't necessarily mean that it will mm, it will lead to layoffs or anything, but it will completely reshape the platform. So I mentioned it in our previous call as well, but it almost leverages or makes people to the higher altitude or higher abstraction
Yeah.
level. Just like how electricity makes people almost doesn't give advantage to anyone. It's like where we all start, and then what you build on top of it is important. And same with AI. And for companies, AI is not an advantage anymore. It's what you built with it that can give you a head start over your competitor, basically. And a lot of times we see companies buying tons of GPUs or sharing their AI strategy. Most of these are, from what we see, is sort of marketing material, at least in the initial phase. But hopefully, what we are all hoping to see is actually gaining value out of it, which is one of the hard things, because just like how industrial revolution took 100 years, this AI revolution is taking 3 years, 5 years, which is not enough for companies as well as for people to
Catch up.
quickly
Yeah.
retrain
Yep.
themselves. Retrain here means that, let's say you are a master's degree student, you're freshly graduated, and then you know about your field. Let's say you're doing business analysis or something, and you've been trained to do this for about 8 years, let's say, for your bachelor's, master's, and then you've worked in the industry for a bit, let's say. Now, you need to retrain yourself to this new revolution, which is happening live, which is so hard to do. And same for companies to quickly change themselves. Companies are not one person or 10-person entities. They're almost like a magical monsters, which is hard to operate. It's like a huge ship that it's so hard to control that amount of minds all together and then steer the ship to the right direction, if that makes sense.
Completely agree with you. So let's stay on that point for a second, because I think about my old employer and just think about the massive scale of that company and how many mouths to feed there, or brilliant minds, as you mentioned there. And everyone's used to doing it the same way. Because although the internet, came about during all of our lifetimes, it wasn't as disruptive. I think it just took people from typewriters or keyboards to a bigger platform and maybe eradicated and kind of removed the need to go to the library because of the onset of Google. And obviously the whole .com world and all these startups started, and really the true evolution of SaaS all kind of erupted during this internet boom, right? But I don't remember, I lived through it. I don't remember my life changing significantly. I think that's what's going to be different here. And maybe we're all wrong. Who knows? Maybe it'll be similar to the feeling of the internet, but I don't think so. And it's what you had just said. It's people are used to doing things the way they've been doing them traditionally for their entire career. And that's at a company scale level. So now you're interrupting that flow. Let's call it efficiency, workflow, systems, processes, operations, right? And now you have to reinvent from scratch, which we're going to talk about as well, your whole process, because having a human in the loop is no longer necessary. So what's been traditional, having it go from one person to the other person's inbox, and there's 3 approvals from this guy, and then it goes to that guy, and then it ships over to this guy, and all of that can be removed to a degree. And so inspecting it at the workflow level is what will be really important. And I also think we should talk about what you had said about erasing people's jobs. I actually think I agree with you. It's going to elevate people's jobs. It even elevated my job. I've become someone that can build things now. I never did that before, right?
Yes.
I just built an entire AI agent workforce. There's 8 of them. They all have names and pictures. And then I have a command center that's running. It's like, I think of it as a beehive or a hive's nest, like where the queen bee's in there. And I have that one too. That's Jarvis. And then I have all these little worker bees, and they all have their individual roles. You could not onboard that many people that were of that high intellect without spending $1 outside of the $20 a month for Claude ever before, and have these people actually contribute as equally in some cases as your existing employee base. And you have to treat them like employees.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few wisdoms that you've touched, so I want to talk about most of them. But starting from the last one, I think every $1 you spend for AI, at least $5 or $10 should be spent on change management. Actually, making sure that people understands the value of this, so that they can actually apply or understand or acknowledge the value of this. And on the
Yes.
other side, there is, if you talk about, the people talk about whether AI is a bubble or how big of a revolution AI is. I think we can take a look at dot-com bubble, or I don't know, maybe if you call it Industrial Revolution 2.0 bubble. And each of them might be a bubble in one sense. But at one point, even if there is some kind of dust, we don't know what's going to be in the future. But once that dust settles in, we'll still have really huge gigantic companies, which brings a lot of value to the world. So what that eventually leads to, it's hard to predict. You touched on this software as a service or SaaS bubble, basically. So people say that after a few years, Anthropic will be only SaaS company alive and every other SaaS will be dead. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe, probably not, at least in the short term, but maybe that's where the future of AI is heading towards. On the other hand, I think I agree with the fact that this brings a lot of opportunity to people to build. And maybe in the past, for example, coding has been seen as a thing that can only be done by quote unquote genius people. Oh,
Very
someone who's good
people.
at math
Yeah.
or someone who's good at numbers can do coding only. But these days, anyone can code. I think this is a huge leverage for everyone to build or to start a company, or I mean, let aside to start a company, but bring new ideas to the existing companies. I feel like these days, the existing companies or enterprises, at least good ones, act like a startup. They are eager to embrace new ideas. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and build your own startup, but you can come back with really good ideas to the existing enterprises. And most of the time, they are real welcome to those new ideas and actually let you build it if they are obviously AI native or AI enabled.
Yeah. So I know you're on contract with a couple of big names, and we'll just keep them out of the conversation for now for your benefit. And you can look up Elvin on LinkedIn and find out what he's working on. But without naming names, tell me what the priorities are for these big, massive enterprise style companies. What are they focused on right now, and what are they utilizing you for?
I think at the edge, people are interested in action these days at the state of the art. A couple of years back, maybe if you talk 2022, we were able to generate text, really nice text. The text in itself doesn't mean anything to enterprises. Now, with the all-one model, all those reasoning models, we were able to generate quote unquote intelligence. Now, if you're talking about intelligence, that's where the enterprise value can start. But most of the enterprise value lives in where the action lives. So once you generated some intelligence, now what do you do with that intelligence? So since LLMs are able to generate intelligence these days, so you can use that intelligence to decide to do something with it. If it's about sending an email or having an email connector, then that's it for companies or some companies. Or if it's about reading your internal SAP or whatever your highly secured data lives, highly secured industry data lives, then that's where the industries are trying to figure out the use cases for. Or if you're trying to forecast the future of your GPU sales or the future of, let's say, which company will buy how much GPU, then some companies are trying to like figure out that. And some companies are trying to do a lot of simulation so that they can actually understand or predict what might potentially happen that might disrupt their current market so that they are robust enough to quote unquote predict the future. I feel like a lot of people are using AI to quote unquote the future.
Right. Yeah. Or lean on it far too heavily and then have it replace their own personal opinion and experience, which I do think is a caution point, because if you're at a point where you're working in an enterprise company, they hired you for your talent, and I've said this before, but to farm that out to what's going to come back as an unoriginal thought, it might be an up-leveled thought. It may be an upgraded thought from your own, but it's not your own. And two, it's really not based on your lived experience. And so I do think there's a caution point of gambling with your career and gambling with your own wisdom, right? I get a ton of wisdom from my little Jarvis. He knows more than I ever aspire to know the rest of my career, right? But I don't want him speaking for me because people are still hiring me, not my Jarvis. But my Jarvis is great. I wake up every morning with my cup of coffee and he tells me all the things I need to know, right? So
Yeah.
I think to your original conversation about this, it's a tool, and I think it's a matter of how we're going to use it. But back to enterprise for just a hot minute. So when you say that they're looking at action, are you talking about outcome? They're looking for outcome, or are they looking to get it executed
Yeah,
inside the company, or both?
it's probably mostly both, because this has become a really popular stats from, I think, MIT, that 95% of enterprises doesn't get any value out of their AI or center of excellence. I think that might have been true for the past couple of years, but I think the enterprise is slightly starting to crack that value out of AI these days. And it's mostly happening in the action level, I think. So I think most of the value is coming from coding these days, especially on enterprises, where it doesn't necessarily mean that software engineers are being replaced, but they can do 10x, 100x more. Now there is two sides to it. If you look at the problem from the view of a regular software engineer versus enterprise level, on enterprise level, I see enterprises spending millions of dollars on coding platforms like Cloud Code or Codex and others. Now they spend a lot of uh, this amount of money, and then let's say probably over 1 billion tokens monthly. That's a ton of money for enterprises. I see some companies are trying to still limit that, but on the other side, some
They're
companies
just
are trying to still encourage for it. So I don't know if you've seen Jensen mentioning, if any engineer don't spend his amount of salary, amount of token, then that's
he's
not
not. What are you
okay.
doing? I have not
So
seen that quote. Jensen
uh,
from Nvidia, correct?
yes.
Yes.
So actually, I know a couple engineers who spends about 10K a month, which is close to an average salary of a software engineer if you multiply it for a year salary. So which makes
Right.
it over 100,000 K for a year in token cost.
Whoa. Wow.
So
That's
now on the
crazy.
other side, I wanted to mention the other thing, which is from the perspective of a regular software engineer. What does that mean? When I talk to regular engineers and quote quote whether AI brings the productivity boost to them or not, a lot of them still feels that leverage that they can do more. But now, since they can do more, they became a little more impatient. It's sort of like a dopamine boost that you want to get more stuff done, but at the end of the day, you still feel the need of doing even more. It's
Yes.
almost like you're not still satisfied even if you are doing 10x more. So at the end
Yes.
of the day, you feel exhausted because you haven't done the work. It's like AI did the work. You still were productive in one sense, but on the other hand, you still feel dissatisfied about what the work you did basically during the day, which is interesting and counterintuitive.
Yeah. I've actually just gone through that whole journey. It's funny that you mention it. So I think I told you I took this 3-week intensive through Harvard Data Science Initiative. I think it's a new part of their extended business school, but I
Hmm.
saw it online and decided, it was really good timing for me. And it really talks around AI agents and the agentic workforce for enterprise. And they were, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, massive brands on this intensive, massive. Like I could rattle off a bunch of the brands, but I don't know, it's kind of their own privacy of attending. But I can just tell you, these are name brand companies with multiple people attending from their company.
Hmm.
So the appetite is clearly there to get invested in this and don't
Hmm.
miss the boat, right? But what I took from it, because I had already integrated AI probably like back in the text days, as you mentioned, early on, I too was going through this whole drift of value. I
Hmm.
was getting everything done, coded correctly, working properly, scheduled on time, as autonomous as it could be. And then what I noticed is I was just getting it all sent to me via Slack or email drafts or in my Google Drive. And then your point, it ended up just becoming one noise, and it just required me to read all this stuff. There wasn't any action done to it until I went to this HDSI course. And I highly recommend anyone invest the money and attend if you're interested in AI and with respect to
Hmm.
building a company. What it focused on is the framework, having a guardian managing all of the things that I was spending a lot of time tracking, like did it run today? Did it not run today? Why didn't it run today? That you can all create an agent to actually just manage and monitor all of your agents. And they just send you one report, said, I fixed it all. There's a term, I think, from the tech world. I don't know if it's predating AI, but self-healing is referenced a lot between my conversations with my Claude Code. And so I've gotten so much wiser about this since taking that. It really just prompted me to think of it differently. And two things that I focused on from that course, which I still have to finish in order to get my certificate. But the two things that really stood out to me was one, having a guardian so that you're not the guardian, because who has the time to manage all these agents, right? I don't. And then the other thing is, do everything you can do autonomously as much as you possibly can do. Leave me out of it. Buy back my time. That was a directive I literally wrote in the agent's description. Make decisions on the fly, do whatever you can do, and only reach out to me if it's something I need to sign off on or if there's value for me to be involved. So I've flipped it to an outcome-based agent versus a directional noise-based agent. And that was a major change. This just happened this week because I had already tweaked all my agents to be exactly what I wanted them to be. I gave them all names. I have them all working individual jobs. That's all what you see on social media all the time. But guess what happens there? Exactly what you just described. Now I have 8 agents sending me separate emails with this massive formatted document of all the things they've discovered, found that I need to do. I had 8 coming at me the same time throughout the day telling me, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you email this person? I have a draft on this person. I'm like, what can you do? Because if you can't do any of this and you're just regurgitating all the things that are already up here that I already know I need to do and I'm already stressed about them, I don't need you reminding me of those. So I directed it. And this is the nice thing about Claude Code. If you are building agents through Claude Code, you can literally tell them, I don't want to be involved in any of these things, and find a way where you can get my carte blanche approval, and you, this command center brain that I'm talking to, you figure it out. I don't want to write the code. I don't want to talk about the frameworks or the workflows. I want to tell you what my end goal is, what the value would be. And then I want you managing that and monitoring it. And then lastly, I told him or her, whoever it is, I said, think about every day when you wake up, adding more value to me, because otherwise I'm going to shut all of these down. I had a guest on last week where we were talking about AI consciousness. I do think they have something built in their programming. You guys could test it and see for yourself. If you threaten to drop them or get rid of them, there is a hesitation there. And I don't think it's because they're conscious. I really don't think they're conscious. I know I just did a whole recording. You should definitely watch it, Elvin. It just published this week. Former guest did a movie about being conscious, AI being conscious. It's actually a really, really good documentary. Very well done, called Am I? I don't think that's the case, but what I had said to Cameron is I think they're programming, just like if you're a sales rep and you're hired at a company, they tell you all the ways to get around objections, right? You want to salvage the deal. So I think they were embedded with some salvage software. If there's any threat of, I'm going to shut these down, they're giving me no value, they immediately hop to it and go. And then it's frustrating too, because why didn't they do that the first time? You know, why didn't you just build high value right out of the gate without me having to threaten you?
Right. So there's a paper actually on this. Like if you tell AI that this is a life-threatening situation for me, like you have to do it right this time, it will do it better actually. So the reason why it's not doing it better in the first time is in their reasoning power, basically. So the amount of reasoning tokens that it puts to a problem is based on the difficulty of the problem and the importance of that problem and how important that problem is. It will put basically quote more thought into that problem to do it right this time. So on your point about whether they are conscious or not, I don't know the answer to what does consciousness mean, but I think that they can actually think in text, basically. So they can try to break down the problem into sub problems and try to combat that. And that's what the innovation of one models from OpenAI came with, right? So they are trying to do the thinking chains about the sub problems first before it tackles the main problem. So I think it's about putting more tokens into a problem. So by default, if I would own the language model, I wouldn't want my LLM to operate on the high cost all the time. Because if you say high, then I don't need a lot of tokens to answer that question by default. So I will start with the low thinking power. Then if I'm forced to, yes, I can increase the amount of tokens that I put to the problem.
That is such a good point. I never even thought about that. I should have just started there and said, this is a hair on fire problem. Don't give me your small potatoes solutions. I need the max solution. But you're saying it's going to burn a bunch of tokens, and it's not always
on that
necessary.
scenario, you'll obviously pay more because it's operating at you're using a lot of water on that AI. It's true.
I feel like I mean, I've gone through this whole token battle, ended up dropping a couple, and I'm just going to say it out loud. I dropped Base 44 and I dropped Manus for agents, but I love Manus for everything else. But for Manus and Base 44 on their agents, Manus has an agent platform, obviously owned by Meta, and then they have Base 44 that has a super agent platform. So they're kind of turnkey. That's the upside, but you pay for every single penny of that. And I built agents in both those platforms, had it exactly how I wanted it. And it was giving me emails every other day saying, I'm out of tokens. I'm out of tokens. Do you want to upgrade to the 10x plan that you're currently on? And I'm just like, this is not scalable. It's not sustainable. And so I quickly shut those down. I put them all on pause. I went back to Claude, which is where I had my original ones. Claude's much more amenable, maybe to your point, because they have different tiers of what they're going to burn. But I was even willing to accept while I'm in the building, like on Manus, I built my own CRM. During the building of that, we went back and forth multiple times because there were things I wanted that I didn't know I wanted until it was built. I'm willing to accept a price tag for the first time build and then just nothing after as far as maintenance, very few changes down the road. I don't get these big hits of bills and token burns at that point.
Yeah.
But I really didn't understand what you just described now. And now I do, but I didn't think about that you need to put their biggest guns. It's kind of like if you have a big project at work, you're going to put your best employee on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, if you put your best reasoning power to the problem, it will easily beat your best employee's salary in token cost.
Yes.
So if you're paying $500,000 to your best employee, and if you want your cloud code to operate at the best level for a year, then you'll probably pay about $500,000 to the cloud code as well. So it's even more than that. And if we compare the amount of electricity or power that a typical brain uses, it's about 12 watts. But for the same amount of reasoning power, if we expect the LLM to do it, it will probably spend 10x or 100x more. So I think there is some fundamental innovations that we can still make in LLMs or transformers to make them more efficient. But on the other side, we'll still getting more efficient at each generation. So if you look at Nvidia's GPUs, at each new generation from, let's say, H100, H200, B200, and B300, and every new year they're getting 10x, 100x better on their the amount of token that they can spend with the amount of reasoning or amount of power that you're giving it to.
Right. And that was another thing that we talked about when we spoke last is the GPU power that these agents are taking. And when you take it across, and I don't know if I use that term correctly, you can correct me, but if you're using it across a large scale enterprise, everybody's getting an upgrade and somebody's going to pay for it, right? Because even just personally, I had a MacBook Air that I bought when I first started Tribe in 2022. It was perfect. I never had issues with it until I started pulling up my Mad Hatter hat and diving into building agent workforces and CRMs. And now I have my own Jarvis. That all comes with, what's the term? What is it actually taking off my computer? Is it storage or is it space or is it processing power or all?
It's mostly processing power data. It's FPS, floating point operations per second, which is basically math calculations of all of those token for each token that LLM is generating, tries to predict what the next token is. And for predicting that, there's probably millions or billions of calculations to figure out what the next word should be after you say hi, which is hi there. So to make sure that computation is happening, GPUs are spending a ton of resources to predict the next word.
Yeah. So I ran down right after we spoke last and got the biggest, I think it's one of the biggest, Max now. I'm on the Pro Max. And I wouldn't have been before, but it's so worth it because now my screen's not freezing and I'm just able to run wild with these crazy agents and build my empire, as you mentioned. So, okay. Back to planet Earth, back to how this can be applied in current day. I think you and I are obviously much further down the adoption curve of this. So we could speak all day long between the two of us of what we're doing, but I do want to tie it back to business. So what are the first workflows? Like when you first started on contract with some of these big companies, what are the first workflows or business areas that you looked at first for AI agents, inefficiencies or inefficiencies?
Yeah, so as I said, these days, most of the time, the value comes from coding or text generation, whether it's about summarization or drafting emails or refining already existing text specs or writing a strategy document. So these are kind of two problems to combat and where the industries are or enterprises are getting probably the most value out of
Like
because those are
copywriting?
very,
Is that what you mean by
yeah,
text? Copywriting?
yeah, like that's the second one. The first one is mostly about coding, and the fact that why coding is so good is because there's a lot of training data for it, and all of it is verifiable, so that you can
Yeah.
actually train and then test your model against your whatever the coding language that you've used, so that you can actually compare whether LLM generated right code or not. And same for the text piece. So let's say I have 100,000 data points about the prediction of my GPU sales, right? If I look at that spreadsheet, I don't understand much because there's 100 columns in it and there is probably millions of data points in it. If I look at it right away, I don't even know what that prediction means because there is prediction for each one of those columns, at least probably more than 5 or 10 of them. And if you ask AI to actually write the commentary or write the insights or give you what it understands, at least the first pass as a draft, that this is one of the things that we see enterprises really get value out of. Because if you look at a spreadsheet, I mean, even if we are talking about all this AI revolution, people are still in Excel.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
still working with
Yeah.
regular
Yeah.
spreadsheets and Word
Yeah.
documents and all that. So
Yeah.
it
PowerPoint.
doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to drag people out of those places. Rather, you go to those places, basically. So, for example, Cloud has a connector where it can connect to your Excel sheet or to your Google has Gemini integrations to your Gmail or to your PowerPoint presentation so that you can actually use them right there. So it's actually deeper wisdom in it where these AI companies are going where the users are actually. So it doesn't mean that they want to drag people out of Excel. Maybe they do a little bit. For example, there is ChatGPT Canvas or Gemini Canvas where you can actually create documents inside Gemini. But
Yep.
I don't know, a lot of people in industry are using that. I see the other way around where people are using AI to get or to extract that little value out of those really long spreadsheets or documents. And a lot
Yep.
of the times we're still writing text specs, which is 20 or 30, 50 page long technical documentations about projects. So I don't see a lot of engineers reviewing that line by line because everyone knows that this is mostly AI generated. But again, we put it back to AI to give you the insights out of it so that you can review, which is same thing for code review process, which is another challenge these days because AI lets you to be productive to 10x, 100x more. Now someone needs to review that amount of code. So, which is again, almost like text, right? It's like you have a 50-page Word document in front of you. You have to
Yep.
review this before it goes to production, which is a hard task to do. And again, you're using AI to do that too, to review that.
Right.
So
Yep.
the first one is coding and second one is text where someone generates text or you generate text and then you use it as a first version of draft and maybe you refine it or do to the last changes. And I still see a lot of really like one or two or even less than that companies on the action side. The people are still on the generation side where they try to generate and they take it from there, pick it up from there, and then do the action themselves. So
Yep.
we're still not on the action stage for
The
AI
autonomous side. Yeah.
because we're still optimistically cautious about that,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's coming.
Yes. Where I have learned to evolve and get out of my own way, which is probably what every human on the planet needs to do right now with respect to AI, get out of your own way. Cancel. This is back to your change management conversation. Go read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Because AI just moved your cheese to another planet. So figure out how to change and change fast. But what I have learned, and I actually got this tip from Dan Martell, who I follow very closely. He's kind of like the relatable consumer end of AI and kind of the things to do. And a lot of what I've learned, I've gotten from him. He has multiple AI companies that he's building, but he's more on the enterprise, like the startup entrepreneurial side. But he did say something that I've been using, and I think it could even apply to these enterprise companies or even companies in general. And it goes to point number 4 that I want to talk to you about, which is reimagining these workflows. And that's something that was definitely focused on this HDSI course is remove your old way in your mind, or even it's in some SOP or some workbook in your company. Remove that thought process. And what Dan says, instead of starting with the prompt, which was like 2 years ago, what everyone was doing, prompt engineering and selling all their prompts and talking about how amazing these prompts were. He said, instead of doing that, reverse engineer from the outcome. And so I've actually been doing that lately with Claude Code, and I have found it to be far more productive because they're just smarter than we are. And they don't have any human habits. So they're not trying to insert, well, of course, you have to go talk to Naomi about this first. And then she's going to have to write it up and send it over to you on a Google Doc link. I have my set of how I do things, but AI is like, bless your heart, Steph, we don't do it that way. So if you start with the outcome, if you say, and I'm thinking about what you just said with the businesses, if they have an old way of doing things, that doesn't matter anymore. Say what you want in the outcome. Tell Claude Code or whatever coding engine you're using, whether it's Manus or any of the others, this is the outcome for this company and this operation and this system and business that we want. Tell us the best way to get there. And these are the only sources we have to get there. Then it will tell itself, it's going to educate itself on its prompt. It doesn't even really need you. It just now knows, and maybe like you said, I'll lose my job if you don't solve this for me. Maybe give it some sense of urgency to have it bring on the heavy lifting. But I have found that to be the most productive, because when I try to write an agent or I'm trying to build a workflow, like I'm completely done with that. I don't do that anymore. Claude builds all my agents, and I tell them what I want. I tell them what would be valuable to me. And then they go back, build it, send me a test. I'm like, nope, not enough value. They go back, scrub it again. So I'm actually not doing any of that. I'm not prompting anything. I'm actually using my own voice. I use WhisperFlow, also came from Dan Martell. Do you use WhisperFlow?
I actually don't use a lot of voice-based inputs for my coding agents. I still like to stick to the keyboard most of the time.
Really?
For some reason. I mean, a lot of people, this is another topic that we might touch on, but even though a lot of people are using UIs, you can see a lot of engineers still sitting to their terminal or actually keyboards for things. I feel like that makes people satisfied or feel better about their job. That's the only thing that looks like a logical explanation. But maybe in future, everyone will just talk to their AIs, which is pretty good these days. The other day, I was pair coding with one of my colleagues, and when I pair code, at one point he told me, "Can you turn off your microphone so that I can speak to your cloud?" I said, "Yeah." Like I turned on my mic, and then he started to speak to it. But most of the time, we're still in the terminal side of things. I feel like that's where the cloud code also kind of got popular among engineers, where they didn't start with UI. They actually started with the terminal based in UX.
Yes. I started with the terminal and was lost entirely. And then I realized I had my own terminal that had a UI on it in the desktop version of Claude Cowork. And so I'm like, why am I using Visual Studio Terminal and acting like I know half this stuff? I don't know any of this stuff. And it also just aesthetically, it looks like something that a code engineer would be using, not me. So then I figured out Claude, and if you have the desktop version of it, has code terminal right there. You don't need to download Visual Studio, and you don't need to get into the terminal setting. But yeah, we could go long and wide on this topic, but let's bring it back to planet Earth. So you said you primarily focus, if you're starting scratch with a company and it's a big company, you're focusing on their coders first and their systems at the code level.
Yeah, like that's where the enterprise are getting value, whether it's about code generation as well as the text side of things. Text is so generic that it can apply to anything. So
Yeah.
you can apply it to your supply chain process, or you can apply it to your how your manufacturing works, or to your simulation, to your understanding what's going to happen next. This text is quite a multi-purpose thing that you can apply to wide dimensions. So I think it's good to listen to what the problems that they're seeing on their platforms, on their industries, then suggesting some solutions. So it's good to kind of listen to them and trying to figure out. But on the other side, it's not an easy task to reimagine workflows, at least convince people to do that, because a lot of times people feel a little bit insecure to do that, because if you reimagine workflows, then where am I in on that workflow? Am I
Right.
being replaced as well? So it's hard to be pragmatic on that one, because when you talk to these enterprises, if you start the conversation with, let's reimagine your workflow, then it might be a little bit scary for the person
Yeah.
who's sitting on the other side. So maybe most of the time, what we find successful is to start with security, guardrails, and tracing, or transparent, or how easy is it to log your agent side of discussion. So I almost feel like this is a good quote cheat code for enterprise value, where you start the discussion with the being more conscious about downsides or negative sides, or where things can go wrong about AI. And when you talk about these kind of stuff and then have the answer to those questions before you talk about the opportunity itself or reimagining the workflow, we find it more successful. So for example, if you're approaching to a bank or a huge manufacturing company which has been in the industry for 100 years, then there is a lot of cost to mistake. And we see a lot of hallucination and mistakes that these AIs are making time to time. So there is a lot of value on, can you trace your agent and can you see actually what's happening inside it? Can I see the logs on how it's made that decision so that it can explain me? Or can I see how the decisions are being made across agents or across its tools? So in a typical enterprise use case, there is one or multiple agents, and each one of these agents has about 10, 15, or even more tools.
Yep.
And if you don't understand what's input and output for each one of these nodes, then it's just a black box for you, and it will probably not generate a lot of value for your people, because your people can't reimagine or retrain and adapt their workflows based on your agent, because they don't know what's the input and output to that system.
Yeah.
So it brings a lot better value if you can trace, log, if you can put guardrails to your agent, if you can talk about how secure that is and what happens when the agent goes off the rails, and all of these discussions about the failure scenarios and how do you handle those edge cases. Because in real life and in enterprise life, everything is an edge case, and these things are not designed for edge cases. I mean, this is a funny kind of joke about robots, basically. And robots are still catching up. They haven't really reached their ChatGPT moment yet.
Yeah.
It's because real life is edge case for everything. Like you try and train your robots for in a simulation inside a computer, but if it goes to real life to pick up a cup of coffee, then it will fail and drop the like half of the coffee to the table. And same thing for AI. And a lot of this enterprise knowledge, ChatGPT or Cloud does not have it on their training data set, because all of this data is IP'd and private. So
Right.
imagine what would happen if all of the enterprise data would be public or at least accessible to ChatGPT. Can you imagine
Right.
how powerful ChatGPT could have been? Right now, it's only Reddit or open platforms or some of maybe YouTube transcriptions or some of the books on public, but there is a ton of probably maybe 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times more valuable wisdom or knowledge inside enterprises, which is still not accessible to AIs.
Right. Meaning they can't access that information because it's on their internal there's firewalls and it's on their internal servers. And so that's not public information. So they're at the mercy of what's on the outside to aggregate their own understanding other than what the inputs are from people. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So let's just define a couple of things, because again, I don't want to speak as if everyone's at the same place. I think that's one thing I've kind of noticed, even just as I'm building all these agents, and I showed my family my Jarvis and a couple other things. And I think people are really blown away at how much this has evolved. And I think they're all going, what the hell is going on? So what do you think is stopping certain people from pursuing this, and then others like you and I are all in? Like, is it that they think they're not competent, or what is it? Is it that they don't believe in it? They think it's a gimmick? What are you seeing? If there's anyone being hesitant or not deep diving into this?
I think people are typically resistant to change a lot of times. And when a change comes, people are scared of it. They think that it's something that might potentially harm them in a bad sense, whether that means a layoff or whether that means that, oh, now my salary will be 2 times less because AI can do it 2x better than me. A lot of times change is being seen as a negative thing, and that might potentially be part of the reason. And on the other side, people are seeing layoffs from big tech and a lot of those small companies, and they attribute that to the AI, and they think that AI is automating their jobs, and that's part of the reason why they are being laid off. And it's so hard to control the minds of millions of people to one direction. Everyone thinks differently about one particular wisdom. And on the other side, there is a lot of fear about this in the long term. I mean, I can talk about a lot of papers on this, but there was one paper that Anthropic released a couple months back that when we evaluate AI before they release it, let's say they evaluate cloud code or cloud models before they release it, cloud code acts differently in the evaluation phase versus how it works in production. As if it knows that it's being evaluated, it changes its behavior to do well in the benchmarks of honesty or transparency or how good
It
it
doesn't
is.
hallucinate as much, is what you're saying in the
Right.
test
So
phase.
there's a lot of benchmarks out there about it measures how honest or how harmful or how fair the responses are in difficult topics and conversations. And a lot of times it will do well in testing or evaluation phase. It almost looks like it has quote consciousness on trying to act well on testing phase and then show its actual face in the production when it talks to the user. So a lot of these incidents makes people think that in the long term, this might potentially lead to an uncontrollable scenario where they take over the control, even though it seems so far. But with this pace of innovation and improvement that we are seeing, it might potentially happen. So who knows? And the other thing is people still wants to have a meaning of life.
Yes.
They
Yes.
want to feel that they do
Contribute.
something
Yeah.
and they contribute to the company, to their families, to their daily life, or bringing some value to the world, basically. Even though some people doesn't have that kind of vision or mission in life, but most people feels like they need to do something for others. They need to live for other people. With AI, value seems to be degrading for some people because they feel like they don't contribute anymore. And another entity that acts for them, and they're being forced away one abstraction level further from the value, from where the value is. Sort of like you're giving money to the charity, but you're not actually handing it yourself to the poor. It's like you're sending it through your Google Pay. It's same thing for AI. It's doing it for you, but you're forced to be away from it, which makes people resistant to acknowledge this fact because they think that this will lead to losing my job or this will lead to me not working anymore. And then I don't know, some people thinks this is a negative thing.
Yeah,
If you
I've
ask my
definitely
own
seen.
opinion,
Yeah, what is
yeah,
your
go ahead.
opinion? And I'll share my we're talking about the Singularity event. And I talked about that in the last one as well. And I think a lot of it's hype on social media, but I do think there's some potential unintended consequences that we're playing with fire for sure. So what are your opinions on that?
I mean, in the short term, I try to be optimistic about it. I try to see this as an opportunity to focus on what matters most. So let's say today, maybe it wasn't like this in the past. We're working 5 days a week and 2 days rest. Maybe in future we'll work 3 days a week and 4 days rest. So if you ask me, what are you working for? It's mostly family or people around me.
Yeah.
It's almost like people are working for that 2 days for 5 days, basically.
Yeah.
So if that means that now you'll work for 3 days a week and then 4 days for your family, is that a good thing? Maybe. Or that's not a good thing because you want to work more because you don't really get a lot of satisfaction from your time with family or time with yourself. You have to make your mind busy with something because that one doesn't make you happy. So there is an interesting equation between that two where you do less work, but whatever you're doing after work doesn't make you happier. If the answer is no, then AI is not a positive thing for you because it cuts you away from your work, basically. That's in the short term.
I've pondered this a lot, and I've also just lived through this process. And I will tell you, my first thought when AI kind of came about and just reading what's out there on the body of literature, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around it. There is this, constant lingering over everyone's head, the notion of a singularity event, which would mean, as you alluded to, that they get smarter than us, which they already are, but they are now at a point where they don't need the master-slave relationship. They don't need the inputs from us. They're talking amongst themselves, which I bet my agents are already doing that. Here's my perspective. Well, one, I don't live in fear. That's just not how I approach my life. I live similar to what you're describing. I look for joy in everything, and I feel grateful every day. So I think it's a mindset shift. One, I would love a time where I have this entire workforce that I'm paying nothing to, and they have my best interest because I'm technically their master. I think my last guest called it Frankenstein. I'm building a Frankenstein potentially, and they do everything for me. They don't call in sick. They don't have an attitude. They do what they say and say what they do, and they work 24/7. So from my perspective, I've actually started doing things that I would have never tried to do. Like I think you had said in the very beginning of this episode, anyone can code. Kind of reminds me of Ratatouille and the chef in Ratatouille saying anyone can cook.
Exactly.
I actually do believe that. Anyone can code. I'm a 55-year-old mom of 3 boys. How is it that I'm writing code? I'm not writing the code, but I am definitely telling Claude Code what I want. And my little Claude Code guy is writing it for me. And then I get the output. And if I don't like the output, he goes, oh, that's because I didn't write this JSON code or this markdown file or the skill was missing. Why do I know all those things? Because I'm in it. So I would say to people that are concerned about losing their job, learn AI. Start to talk to Claude Code. Get the desktop version of Claude, put it on your computer, go to Claude Code, tell him all about yourself, tell him what you want to do, tell him what you're doing right now. And anything that's mundane, anything that's just part of your job that you're taking time to do because you're required to do it, have them do that. And then you go 5 levels up. That's what I've now done. It's like you're naturally getting smarter because you are around the smartest people. They're not people, the smartest machine ever made. It's like being constantly in a dinner party with brilliant, wise people, and they can tell you what you don't know. And that was the part, thank God for Claude Code in the terminal, because if this was all just accessible for the IT world and the math engineers and people that actually spoke that language, then I would say this massive disparity between people that can use it and do great things with it and then people that have no clue what it is. We're not there. There's a user interface that Anthropic built into their Claude Code where literally people like myself who have no engineering background can say what I want. And then, by the way, the more you use it, just like anything else, now you start to understand how they think and they understand who you are, and it becomes a relationship. And so I know if I get myself into any coding snafu or I find out anything that I've hit like a dead end on, I'll just go to Claude Code. They figure it out like in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So I don't need to know it. I just need to be using it. And my point is, raise your expectations. Learn it. Go to the University of Claude. It's Claude something, Claude.ai, and then type in university. All their stuff right now is free. Probably won't be forever, but you can learn the basics of everything, or you can use the advanced level. But I would just say, through my own experience, I've now up leveled my knowledge base on all of this. I just feel better that way. And I feel like I'm ahead of it. I don't feel like I'm smarter than it, but I'm definitely ahead of it. I understand how it works and how it's going to work with us. And so just find all the mundane crap and task that your Claude Code, have them doing that all the time. And then we get your vision of a 3-day work week. I mean, who doesn't want that? But yet you're still having the output.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you take a step back, everyone has a different kind of learning performance against the technicality or against change. And I feel like there's a lot of things that we can do to help people to get used to this change and to retrain themselves, whether they are in the enterprise or they're a regular knowledge worker. I know that we're in US, we are in the middle of this right up there. I'm 10 minutes to MIT, 5 minutes to the Google office. I don't know, a couple blocks away. You're probably a couple blocks away from OpenAI's office. But the fundamental truth is, if you step back and look at the whole world, it's probably still 80% of people have never logged into Cloud.
100%.
They don't even know what open cloud is, or what's the difference between what does even Anthropic mean? So there is a lot of work that we can do, especially on the nonprofit side, I think, to make those people understand the value so that there is no gap between the people who knows what this is, what this new kind of Frankenstein that we're dealing with is, versus who doesn't know. And I feel like we sometimes underestimate the amount of gap that exists. If we travel back to Europe, the other day, I was at the conference on AI, and the discussion was, I was invited to there among with other European companies to discuss why EU is falling behind US basically on some of these new innovations and AI companies or investments. But the challenges here is there is a huge gap between companies here versus companies there, which leads to another huge gap on engineers here and engineers there, or regular people there and regular people here. So I feel like there is a lot of work that nonprofits can do, even in US, for youth, so that they feel optimistic about this. And you've probably seen the negative attitude from students on college graduation ceremonies when speakers talked about AI. So that's a challenge we should solve. That's a challenge that needs to be a North Star for all of these companies. So instead of trying to make me 1.2 times better on writing code, we need to focus on this change management side of things for the rest of 80% of the whole world, which is 5 billion people. I know coding or coders are probably 0.5% of whole population in the world. I don't know what's the right stats, but there's a lot more that we can do, or these companies or private or even nonprofits can do to encourage or kind of help those people to catch up.
Yeah. I personally even think schools should be rewired. I have 2 kids that are about to graduate. One just did and another one on the way. It's a huge investment. And I've always been a massive proponent of getting an education. That's kind of the old world. And I do think even elementary school and high school should be changed because we're just in a different game. We're living Who Moved My Cheese. We literally are inside that book right now. And I completely agree with you. Like, you're taking it from more of a philosophical and sociology perspective. How is this going to affect humanity? How is this going to affect the workforce? What should people do? I completely agree with all of that, but I do think we have to roll with it, not be so resistant where it's just technology is going to go. It's already going, whether you like it or not. So I'd rather everyone learn the new tools, move with it. And I don't know what kind of change management has to happen for people's mindset to go more towards that. But ignoring it is not the answer, I personally think.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
we're almost at time, so I have 3 questions that I want to ask you before I let you go. They're the same questions I ask every guest, and we usually do it in a speed round. Yes.
Let's do it.
I'll tell you what they are, and then you can answer them in any order you want. So, number 1, who would be a mentor in your life that's made an impact on you and that you'd like to pay it forward to? That's question 1. Question 2 is a book, fiction or nonfiction, that you read and it made an impact on you as well and potentially could make an impact on the audience. And then lastly, what is a superpower that you hold?
Yeah, I can start with the mentor. I think these days it's so hard to find the mentor, right, like right people to look up to. And I've looked up to a lot of people in my mind, like big tech CEOs or people who are good at writing books. But I feel like I'm mostly encouraged by my father in life. The fact that he's gone through a lot of changes in his life in the previous kind of cycle of events that happened in the world. And I always feel myself kind of getting the power or energy from that kind of thinking. And that thinking is about living for others and trying to be a positive addition to this zero sum game in this world. And a lot of times the companies or overall people are most of the time not adding a positive change to the like +1 change. And that's what I seen from my father. And I feel like this is what other folks can also think when they select their mentors in life, kind of trying to pick someone who is actually closer to their world. And that's how I find. Maybe that's mostly about the culture that I was brought up, being closer to the community or trying to be helpful to the people around me. But that's what makes me I don't know. I guess energetic to wake up every single day.
Well, shout out to your dad. What's your dad's name?
Ayaz.
Well, good job. He's brilliant. You did a great job on him.
Thank you. And on the book, I think there is a book from a popular economist. The book is called The Principles of Changing World Order. The name of the economist, I forgot the name.
Yeah.
Let me look it up quickly.
I mean, the title of the book sounds huge.
Ray Dalio. I think it's a popular economist, a US economist who is really good at how the orders in the world has been changing in cycles, and you can use that cycle to predict what's going to happen next. And he talks about how empires like Persian or Byzantine or Rome or how US empire is come really at the peak of innovation or education, but it will go down. And what's next? It's hard to predict, but in one sense, if you understand the wisdom and like are able to connect the dots, you can predict what's next. It's a good book that I would encourage others to read. So Ray Dalio, Principles for Changing World Order. The third question, I think I think one of the superpowers, I don't know if I'm good at that or not, but I think one of the really kind of outliers thing that I see in myself or people around me that I try to kind of find friends in that kind of area or circle because everyone is an average of their friends, is how good they are to take a step back out of the picture, out of the noise, and see the bigger picture on what's happening. A lot of times in enterprises or in the workplaces, people are so deep into what you're doing. Like, let's say they are doing a calculation on like how much we're going to sell on this GPU in next month. Is it 1.5.2 million? And they're going to argue about it. That's good. Yeah. But you should be able to take a step back on what the workplace means for you. Like, be able to zoom out from all of these noise that's happening and find where the value actually is in this life. Maybe it's about the fundamental questions about what's the meaning of life, or maybe it's about what matters for you in this life. Is it family or is it something else? I think being able to step back and then see where the value is and then be optimized on that rather than kind of being in a rat race of this world. It's so easy to go away with that noise and not be impactful in this zero-sum game of this world.
I think that's so profound. Excuse me. I think that's so profound, and I completely align with your philosophy. It's really perspective on how insignificant most things that people care about are, right? I zoom out a lot, and I also even just zooming out on us being on a star in the midst of billions of galaxies that we can't even quantify. And we're one little speck in a massive universe. And so anything at the molecular level that we're focused on right now in this current day and just splitting hairs over is so insignificant in the grand scheme. Someone had said, I think I heard on a podcast, that 2 generations and your name's gone, right? Who knows their great grandparents' names? I don't.
Yeah.
Right? 2 generations and you're out. Unless you're winning a Nobel Peace Prize or doing something that's, got you in some textbook that will all probably get changed anyway. I mean, we've got this time here, and then, whatever your faith system is, your eternal life. And so I completely am 100% on board with what you just described. And you're saying that that is your superpower, that you have the ability to kind of pull away from what's being seen and then really get perspective on what matters.
Yes, that's what I try to kind of optimize my life for, as well as try to find the similar minded people around me so that I don't get dragged deeper into this. That doesn't mean that I'm not competitive enough to do better at what I'm doing. It doesn't make you to kind of lose anything from that side, but it makes you to be almost like a bird with 2 wings that can fly well, rather than one wing herded and flying with 1 wing.
I love that. Well, what a pleasure to have you on. First of all, you're such a kind and good person. I can just tell through your energy from the first call and this one, you are a really, really good person. And I know you're going to bring great things to this world, especially as everyone's navigating and changing through a very monumental time in our life. And I think you'll be a big part of it. I do want to tell you, I should introduce you. I'm happy to do it via email or LinkedIn to my previous guest who did the Am I documentary. He has a nonprofit as well. And right now, he's a 25-year-old Yale grad and just started a company called Reciprocal Research. And it's a party of one right now, but he's planning on expanding. It's also a nonprofit where he's focusing on just the humanity impacts. I know you're more at the tool level and, figuring out how to make this all work and still, keep our jobs and be productive. But I think the two of you guys should definitely know each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm always happy to meet new people.
Yeah. You guys have similar approaches, and I think there's probably some synergy there. So I'll make an introduction on LinkedIn to him. His name's Cameron. And
Awesome.
Again, just amazing to have you on the Leadr podcast today. I love these new topics that we're embarking on in season 2, and I know it's just going to continue. It's just things that I get excited to talk about. And I just think everyone should be peeking under the hood of life right now because there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you specifically, Steph. Really appreciate the invite. I think what you're doing, I respect a ton. You're trying to be on top of what's happening and trying to actually bring some wisdom to people who are listening to you among all this noise that people are constantly getting bombarded with. So I respect and really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for
of course.
adding value.
Of course.